Welcome to Eye on the Illini, folks. We've done a lot of interviews over the last few weeks, and now we've got Brad Sturdy, Kedric Prince. We're going to do an Illini basketball update. There have been a lot of things going on around Illini, especially with practice over the last few weeks. Brad, you take a look at what this roster has been built from two players to where it's at today. What type of grade do you give the coaching staff for putting together such a talented roster?
I mean, they get an A. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't say an A plus yet because, we'll see, right? I mean, there's not a lot of continuity. It's difficult sometimes when you don't have continuity. That's probably the only negative you would find in this roster. I think last year when you brought back guys like Terrence Shannon, Coleman Hawkins, you had those leaders, your key guys back, and then they still did a great job in the portal adding players. Now, this year they went in the portal. I think their portal ads were insane, and their freshman recruiting. I mean, that they brought in, with Will Riley, Kasparas, Jakusionis, and although Tomislav Ivasic, who's he's 21, but he's still a freshman. So I think what they did in the portal was great. So I'd give him an A. It's to be determined like how quickly they can mesh, but I really think this team is going to be really, really good at the end of the year. They may have some struggles, or they may not early on. We'll see.
They're definitely gonna get an A for me. I'm just really, really impressed with the roster. And what I really like about it, and I'm gonna answer your question, is when they had players leave and transfer out, and there was only like two players on the roster. A lot of people really panicked. And I don't want to say we panicked, the three of us, but it looked slim and grim. But we know the coaching staff, and they did their job. I mean, you have to give them an A. I mean, and they just kept going and kept getting better and better. And then they were able to land an outstanding group of young talent that, like Brad mentioned, they haven't played together yet. And I think what they're doing right now in workouts, all that stuff's important because you have to learn each other, scrimmaging and, going through sets and plays and where certain people like the ball and all those little things matter. In the last couple of years with Terrence and, Coleman, I guess, those two guys, they knew each other really, really well. But, then Marcus Domas, he picked it up really quick. When you look at overall, not just in the Big Ten, but nationally, you have to take your hat off to the coaching staff because they not only put together a team that can compete for a Big Ten title, but if they do well and they gel, they can make another run for a late season tournament, maybe a Sweet 16, another Final Eight run.
There's a ton of talent. Looking at the guard position, Brad, we keep hearing about how Brad Underwood likes positional size. And we also keep hearing positionless basketball. What does he put together when you compare that group of guards with Dre, Kasparas, Kylan? And we're even hearing that Trey White, Ty Rogers, Will Riley, they can all handle the ball as well. What can fans take away from this accumulation of talent that they've got there?
Well, I mean, it's insane. I mean, what they've done is they're I think the versatility is the key. Like you have so many different guys. A lot of teams they'll say, well, if you go back, let's go back a couple of years. I'll give you an example. Most teams run like they have a guy they run through ball screens. So what did Illinois do when they had a guy like Trent Frazier? They put him on that other guard. You saw, I remember that one game against Arizona where nobody scored on Trent Frazier for an entire game, but everybody scored when Trent Frazier wasn't guarding him, right? Every guard. So those are the kind of things that you do. Well, the great thing about Illinois is, okay, you got an elite defender. You put him on Kasparas or Kusionis. Well, then we can use Kylan Boswell in ball screens. We can use Ty Rogers in ball screens. Ben Rickhouse, who was in the 98th percentile in ball screen efficiency last year. So you have all these guys that you can use as ball handlers. Draven Gibbs-Lahorn. Dude can score. So you put all these people in place, and you can even use guys like Trey White. I think you'll see him attacking and using, maybe it's booty ball, whatever, how you do it. There's so many different options, though, that they can run through. And I think that's the key, is the versatility and the ability. I mean, they're almost like an NBA program in that they're going to exploit matchups. and they're going to keep doing it. We saw that last year. It was so effective. We have a matchup that works. Let's just keep going to it. You see that in the NBA all the time. Like, I mean, we got a matchup doesn't work. And what do the NBA teams do? Then the defense has to adjust, whether it's running a double team, whether it's, changing the way they defend, whatever they do, maybe it's a trapping from here, whatever they do. And so college teams are going to have to adjust, and then you make that next adjustment, so forth. But it becomes almost like an NBA game, which I know some people may not love it, but it's really the X's and O's are so fantastic to watch, where you're creating those matchups where you have a decided advantage. And that's what Illinois can do because they have so much versatility and so many different guys that can score. And, I haven't talked a lot about Will Riley yet, but from what I understand, since he's arrived, he has put buckets up a lot. I mean, this dude can score. Like, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he just scores, and he does it so effortlessly and fluidly. And you had a guy like that, and Kasparis has gone now, but man, fantastic guy. A lot of guys who can be the creators.
One of the things I like last year, Brad mentioned it, and something as a basketball guy, you cannot overlook matchups. I mean, that is where the NBA is played. And with a roster like this, with all the guards that they have and all the wings, most teams that you put on the floor, if you look at college basketball, you look at UConn, there are very few teams that can put 5 guys on this court that are capable of scoring 14, 15 points a game. I mean, so, and not only just that, you're going to get it off the bench. And what I mean by matchups, so if you put a guy like Trey White, who I know when he was brought in, he was not looked at as being a point guard, but Brad hit it right on the head. He is a strong 6'4" point guard, point guard. He's a lot different than, Terrence Shannon, but he's able to post up guards like Ty Rodgers was able to do. He's 6'6" with a shot now, which we've all seen if you look on social media. They can go small with Kylan Boswell. And the one guy I wish people would just, and I know Brad mentioned him, Draymond Gibbs Longhorn is just at a different level right now. You're seeing the pure athleticism that he has. He's shooting the cover off the basketball right now. The way the roster's been put together, I mean, they could literally put 5 guards out there. You could, if depending upon the team they play, you could really go Will Rogers, Riley, and then Trey Wright and Kylan Boswell. I mean, that's not very realistic, but if teams are, start to press you, you can get the ball up the court quite easy with a bunch of guards like that. So I just like the versatility that they have. I'm just really, really excited to see how they put all this together.
The other thing I think that's really amazing about this team is the way you have multiple players who have been looked at and are evaluated as potential NBA draft choices. Now, obviously, there's no guarantees. You got to go out, you got to play, you got to stay healthy, you have to get better. But we're already seeing Kasparis and Will have both been selected by various places as potential first-round picks. You're looking at guys like Boswell, White, Booth, Ivisic, and Morez as being potential second round picks. They may not be for this year, might be for a year or two down the line. And people aren't really thinking too much right now about Ty Rodgers because he's got to prove he can shoot, but he does everything else. And Rickhouse comes to town, as Brad talked, with some incredible numbers. And he might be the next big thing that nobody even knew about, but the Illini coaches did when they got him to come to town. How important is guys who have NBA potential to doing well in March?
Have you ever seen a team win that didn't have NBA players on it? I'm not trying to. I mean, you've had teams that might win a game or pull an upset, but teams that go deep have NBA talent. This team has NBA talent. They probably have, and I'm going to say this, the difference is this team is young compared to last year's team, but they have more NBA talent than last year's team did. I mean, we looked at last year's team. Who were the NBA guys? You had Terrence Shannon, and you had Coleman Hawkins was on some radars, right? That's really it. I mean, Marcus Damask may get, I'm not saying he'll never play in the NBA for a game or a stretch or 10-day or something like that, but probably not. I mean, and so the reality is this team has multiple guys that are being named on draft boards, whether it's first or second round. I mean, it's conceivable you could have, whether it's Ivasic or Jacusionis or Will Riley. I mean, you got multiple guys who are literally talked about as possibly being lottery picks down the road. And that's not something you see. Even next year, they're talking about Jacusionis. So yeah, this team has a chance to, that's when you can make a deep run in March, when you got guys that are playmakers. You got to have playmakers.
You know what was really funny when you talk about how important this is? Well, probably about 2 months ago, when the top 25 teams start, trickling in, Illinois was nowhere to be found. And then KJ got added to the roster. And then Will Riley got added to the roster. And what happened? They immediately jumped into everybody's top 25 because there's talent. I like the talent from a recruiting standpoint because now, right when we first got there, well, who he put in the NBA? Now he can say, I put guys in the NBA, with Ayo Sumo and Terrence Shannon Jr., guys that are difference makers and who are going to play, not just 10-day contracts. Not that that's a bad thing, but I'm talking about guys who are going to stick and who are making a lot of money. Let's face it, Ayo and Terrence Shannon are making millions of dollars right now. That's the one thing I do like about it. A Booth is a guy that came into Illinois when he was in high school. A lot of people don't know about him because Illinois wasn't really recruiting him. But this kid has a lot of NBA talent. What they look for, I'm not a fan of, but it is what it is. But the one guy, Brad stole my thunder, that has been Humrick House, I think that kid is going to be huge for Illinois. He, to me, is a Luke Goody, Ty Rogers X, because I think he's a better shooter than Luke Goody. I think he's athletic enough. He can put the ball on the floor. And the biggest thing is why I compared him to, I use Ty. Luke was able to be posted up. You're not going to be able to do that to men. And so he's going to be a really, really tough matchup for a lot of people, especially with that booty ball, the pick and roll action, and the staff, like we mentioned earlier, which was your first question. They're going to find somebody who can't guard one of those guys. And I just can't wait to see how frustrating that is for the opposing teams to have to defend that.
The front court is so big. So now you've got Ivasic, you got Morez Johnson. People forget here's a guy who's a borderline top 25, top 30 player coming in. Rick House, Kerry Booth. That's a lot of size at those positions at power forward and center. Brad, what do you see particularly at that center position with two different bigs that were almost they both are very talented, but their talent profile is very varied between the two of them?
Yeah, I think that's really, really cool when you get guys that are, so you have different looks. It's not the same guy, you know what I mean? And they fill roles. I mean, like, right? I mean, so you have more, maybe a bigger, a bigger guy who can, bang and pound. And you got another guy who can do that, but he's more versatile, athletic, and also he can, he's a tremendous rebounder. I mean, like the best rebounder. I think he's one of the best. So when you put those guys together, you have versatility again, and you can match up with anybody. You can play them together too, right? I mean, you can play bigs together. So you can match up with everybody. And that's what they've done with this team, is just make it so there isn't a mismatch for this team. They can match up with everybody. And now that doesn't mean they're going to win,
right?
But you're never going to feel like you're just, there were times last year when you felt like, they were totally overmatched in the paint, right? I mean, you just felt like you had Coleman Hawkins in there. Even when Dane Danger went in, Dane's 6'9", 6'8", 6'9", right? I mean, so probably 6'8" is more likely. But he's a good player. But he's, you're going against guys like Zach Edey, and you're going against guys, I mean, you're just overmatched physically. And now he had, now you have more guys who can match up.
We talked about the guards, now you talk about the bigs. One of the things, and this team is long as well. One of the things I used to do as a coach is when I talk about length. I wasn't a big zone guy, but the example that I used, you could put two guys at the top on a 2-3 zone, obviously the block in the middle near the block. I'd have my team put their arms down. Then I would have the other guys not playing turn around and watch the guys when their arms are up and how long they look. by doing that. And I'm saying this as an example because you cover a lot of space. I'm telling you, a guy like Will Riley, Booth from Rick House, Ty Rogers, Trey White, KJ, they're long. So those to be able to just run down the paint and not be able to deflect passes, that is going to be a different look. Now we know Brad Underwood doesn't play zone. I understand that. But the point I'm trying to make here is when you look at the length that they can put on that floor, Eastman, he's another long guy. That's going to make it really, really tough for people to just sit there and think, okay, I can just run down the middle and then I can play passes or I can shoot over the top. This is why this roster is good. And I really hope that they do gel, like I mentioned earlier, because now I look at teams thinking, you know what, they needed a big. Because last year, I think personally, now UConn was just at a different level. But I think if Illinois had a true big, I think the score wouldn't have been as bad. I think the game would have been a little bit differently. So now you have a guy like that who's on campus that can help, protect the rim. I mean, Underwood, we all like his offense. Well, Coach Underwood talked about how he's a rim protector and he can run. So that's going to be a different thing, a different asset that we haven't seen since Kofi.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, we do have video of Brad Underwood at South Carolina demonstrating how to play a 3-2 zone. And that's what I used when I had to learn a 3-2 zone for one of my teams. And I look at the size of this team, and I think a 3-2 zone, this team would be a dang nightmare for people, especially make sure that the guy on the ball is always really contesting so they don't have that easy skip pass. If folks want to go look at how Brad Underwood coaches a 3-2 zone, it's a very handy video out there on YouTube. So, Brad, you talked about this team at the end of the year. So what do you think the starting lineup is going to be at the start of the season if you had to put your money on it?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think this is tough. I really think that Ivicic starts at center. I think Rickhouse is starting. I think that Ty Rogers is starting. I think that Kasparas Drakusionis is starting. That's where it gets dicey. Is it Kylan Boswell? Is it Draven Gibbs-Lahorn? Do they go bigger? Do they put Trey White out there? I mean, there's a lot of other options. Or do they, but I think that's where it'll come from. I think those four are going to be the ones, but that would be my guess.
I'm not being passive. I'm going to say the same four guys, but I'm going to give the fifth guy because I agree with him a lot. When you look at all the talent, people were probably shocked to hear Brad say Ty Rogers. He was going to be the guy I was going to say because he was the returning player. He's a guy that knows the system, and let's face it, Underwood is going to throw somebody out there that people aren't expecting. But the fifth guy, I think it's going to be Kylan Boswell. I mean, I think there was a guy, the reason I say that is a kid that they recruited so hard in high school. I'm talking hard in high school. Then when he made his name available in the transfer portal, I think he returned the favor. I don't even know if he even entertained any of the phone calls. So I think there's a match made in heaven. I think he'll get the nod, and if he loses it, then I'm definitely going to see a Trey White in that situation. I don't know if they really like Draymond Gibbs-Lahorn on the basketball like that, but to start the season, I like Brad's 5, but I'm 4. But then I'm going to throw Kylan in there as a starting point guard.
Do you guys see Kylan bringing the ball up, or is he going to be your supplementary guy, your 3-point shooter? Because we've certainly seen that Brad Underwood knows how to get 6'1", 6'2" 3-point shooters open in his offense.
I would say that I think that who brings it up is going to be different maybe than who initiates the offense. So I could think you could see Boswell bring it up, get it to Drakusionis on the wing, then he's attacking off the ball screen. Boswell replaces in the corner, and then he's set up for a 3-point shot on the penetration. I think you could see that some. So, yeah, I think, so I think Boswell may look like the point guard if he brings the ball up the floor, but he may not play the point guard in the half court, if that makes sense. I mean, Or maybe Rickhouse. They'll say that, we got a match up here. Because here's the deal. If you got a 6'9" 4-man who's one of the best ball screen guys, what power forwards want to come out and guard him on the perimeter? I mean, like really, I mean, you put a power forward center, they don't work on defending ball screens. That's a guard thing, right? So now you create that mismatch. You got multiple shooters around, can be really effective.
Well, I think from what I've been told, um, Kylan plays well off the ball. I mean, he's a ball handler, but he scores so much more. He seems much more relaxed. You know, if he's playing without the ball in his hand, he will play point guard. He will have to play point guard. And again, for the people out there listening, bringing the ball down the court is not a point guard, because you could have Kofi Coburn do that when he was here back in the day. It's initiating.
Let's not do that. Let's not do that one.
make people better. So I'm not saying he can't do that, because and I tell you, he's really worked on it. But that's what we talked about earlier, the versatility with this offense, because Kenneth Smith is a guy that can play off the ball, and I mean his passing is great. That's what people are really going to like about him, other than the fact that he can score. He's going to make some great passes for people to score. So I don't think, and to be honest with you, from what I was told, I don't think either player cares.
Now comes the magic question that fans love to ask, but who are going to be the top 3 leading scorers for this team this year? I know this is really early to try to put your flag in the ground, but that's why I'm asking it.
It's easy for me to answer. I already got mine. I'm telling you right now.
Okay, you go first, Ked.
I'm going to tell you right now, Ben will lead this team in scoring. KJ will be second. And I really, really, really think there's a really good chance that Ty Rodgers could be that third guy, because I don't think they're going to bail on him. I don't. I mean, if people who listen to this podcast, you subscribe to our message board and read our articles, I'm going to tell you, the stuff that you see on Ty Rodgers is not a fluke. And the reason I picked him third is because he's going to get a lot of minutes. He's going to play. He's not going to be a guy that's going to come in 5 or 10 minutes. Brad likes him, and he's liked him from the day he recruited him, and obviously because he's one of 2 players that came back.
All right. I'm going with, I agree with Ked. I think Rickhouse is the leading scorer on this team. It's not going to be like it was last year, though. I don't think you're going to have a guy scoring 22 a game. It might be 15, 14, 15 be leading scorer, because I think I have more depth in scoring. But there might be games when somebody scores 25, but it might be a different guy every time. I think he's leading scorer. I'm going to go with Jacusionis. And then I'm going to go with the wild card, because I think he's a human scoring machine, and that's Will Riley. I think Will Riley is going to score. I think he's going to score 10 double figures at least by Big Ten season. I think he's going to be scoring 10 plus points a game. I just think he's that talented. I think he's one of the most, Illinois doesn't get guys like Jacusionis and Will Riley very often. I mean, you think about it, we were thinking Merez Johnson. They don't get kids like that very often. They're right. They don't, because he's like a high 4, low 5-star. That's a great recruit. Well, now these guys are even better. These guys are like legit 5-star recruits, top 10, top 15 in the country. It's hard to get guys like that, and Illinois did it with and multiple. They have multiple. If you think about this, they really have 3 5-star kids coming in this recruiting class. That's insane for Illinois. And throw Ivasic in there, right? You could legit say they have 4 5-star kids, 4 top 40 kids, top 30 kids, whatever you want to say. I mean, it's pretty. Sometimes with the portal, we don't step back and look and say, "Holy cow, what have they done?" It's amazing.
How important is the competition levels that Jacusionis and Ivasic that they played against in Europe? How much does that make a difference in how quickly they adjust to the Big Ten, which has a ton of athletes? It has a ton of good coaches. Does that make a difference coming from the background that they have?
Huh. That's an interesting, good question, Mike. I don't know. I mean, I think it obviously makes a difference. So I think it does help. We'll see how much as we go through this. It's a great question. You've stumped me, Mike Cagley.
I have an answer early.
Go ahead, Ked.
Okay, here's my answer. Those 2 players, they played up. So they're not playing against guys that are their age, number one. Okay, so that's an advantage. Are they all Big Ten players? Probably not. But here's where the adjustment is going to come in. when they arrive on campus. I mean, Booth, not a Big Ten player, but he played at Notre Dame. Trey White played at Louisville, Division I program. Ty Rogers was on a team that went to the Elite Eight. They're going to adjust to it because they've some of them have already seen it, and you're going to see it every single day in practice. So that's the one advantage I think. And again, they're playing up from their hometown, so it's not like you're playing against guys that can't walk and chew gum. So personally, is it going to happen overnight? Probably not.
We aren't on the other team. We're not on the other team. So
yeah, no kidding. So
is there
that's an easy answer.
That's good. I mean, here's my thought on a lot of this stuff. Like, I think there's transitions because it's different. I mean, Trey White went from he played for arguably the most dysfunctional program in college basketball last year. I mean, Louisville.
Well, now he's returning. He's returning to the Big Ten because he started out at USC.
Yeah, now he's back in the Big Ten. So there you go. Yeah, I guess how you look at it, right? But no, so it's tough to. I think it's hard to project what he'll do. Now, here's the other side of this. Like, I look at these guys, they have to learn how to play a little differently. Like, I think whether it's Ivasic or whether it's Jakusionis, they're going to have to learn to play a little different. Like, Underwood talked about this a little bit. In Europe, they run so many sets. It's like come down, because it's more NBA style, right? They want to run, the Illinois will run sets, but they also want to play some free flowing, get it up and down and go, and just kind of get into an immediate, transition ball screen or immediate kick to the wing, cut through. You got their flow style offense that they run, where they want to have some flow. And then it may end up in a ball screen or an action or that they want, but they have just patterned actions that they'll kind of get started with. I think they're going to have to learn to play with more flow. But the thing is, they both are high basketball IQ guys, but I think it's just different than what they've done before. So maybe it's not competition level as much as is, systemic type things where they're just it's a little different type of basketball.
I think that's probably a pretty good answer. I do think that the athleticism they run into night out and night in the Big Ten is probably going to be an adjustment. You just look at the three guys that Rutgers brought in their freshman class. Those guys are all three A-level athletes that you're going to be running into. As we look at this, how important, with this many transfers, how important is Brad Underwood's background as a JUCO coach to get these people, this team, to become, instead of 12 players, one team?
I think that's what he's did at the you have to do that at junior college level, because every 2 years you get new guys, sometimes every 1 year, I mean, so yeah, I think that's a task, but I think it's something that gives him experience that maybe most guys at the high major level have never been at the JUCO level. I mean, let's look around. I mean, there's not many guys who've done that. They started an assistant, moved up, or they were low major, mid major, high major, kept moving up the ladder, whatever. A little different. Now, I think that versatility or that ability to do things in kind of a different manner, I think more coaches are going to have that with the portal now. That's what you're learning. But Underwood kind of started maybe ahead of the game, and maybe that's why Illinois has been so successful in the portal, is because they are able to make that quick transition because Brad Underwood's been there, done that.
Well, I'm going to answer that question with the question for you two.
Uh-oh.
Here's the deal. Okay, here's the deal. Brad Underwood was at the junior college level, and you're right, it is different. It's a different animal. But let's just talk about the Big Ten. Name a coach in the Big Ten that has mastered the transfer portal as well as Brad Underwood. Because, I mean, I not Tom Izzo.
Matt Payne.
There's not a coach. No, not the transfer portal. Matt Payne's done well, but I'm going to tell you, the reason I'm saying that is because Brad has set the bar high, and he's not afraid to tell a player, this isn't working out for you. Maybe you should go somewhere else. And it's not kicking players off the team. Nobody is saying that, because I'm going to tell you right now, from everything that I was told to some of the players that left the roster, they actually helped some of these kids to find other schools. They mean what they're saying is basically, Illinois is not a place for you. It didn't work out, blah, 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 and there's no hard feelings. But again, my question is, who has mastered the transfer portal? And it's kind of the way junior college is, because you can go out and you can get other kids. He's done really, really well with it.
Yep.
Totally agree with that. How important is Adam Fletcher to the success of this team? Because I have seen the Kylan Boswell pictures, Jake Davis, we haven't even talked about, 6'6", 3'4", who comes in with the ability to shoot from deep. He looks like a different person already. I can't wait to see what Morez came in looking pretty darn intimidating. I can only imagine what he's going to look like with 6 weeks of Adam Fletcher. How important is the strength and conditioning coach to what Brad Underwood and Orlando Antigua and Tim Anderson and Jeff Alexander are putting together?
Well, it's huge. I mean, look at that's what they've sold with these European guys. That's what they sold Will Riley, Kylan Boswell. They're going to get back in shape. Look at Jake Davis, the transformation he's already made. I mean, it's really, I know it's really wild that what he's able to do. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with what Fletch does with these guys because I know their beach muscles or whatever are being cut, but look at how much more fit they are. Look at Illinois last year from a conditioning standpoint. They were able to play guys a lot of minutes. Now, hopefully they won't do that this year, but guys like Terrence Shannon are just and Marcus Damask are in insane physical condition to play the amount of minutes that they did with the amount of usage that they had as well. And so that's a testament to Fletch. But yeah, Fletch is the selling point. I mean, he's one of the biggest selling points they have. And
Literally and figuratively.
literally, he's a big dude, right? Fletch is not a small guy. So yeah, it's really good. I think it's really important, that part of it.
Mike, that's an awesome question. I'm glad you asked. I want to talk about Will Riley. I had a conversation with his mother through an interview that we had on IlliniGuys on our site.com. And she basically told me in so many words what the presentation that Fletcher gave her and her husband and that Will saw, they were impressed with because he's a game changer. And you know, the one thing that people may not realize is the longevity, the conditioning. I mean, Terrence Shannon logged a lot of minutes last year, and he was able to do it. When these recruits are being brought to campus, when they're on campus, Fletcher is a huge part of it, what they eat, how they do it. And what's really cool about it, they show these recruits and their families what they should look like and what they're going to look like. And then the proof's in the pudding because you can see it. You just mentioned a couple of players, you know, Davis. You mentioned Kylan Boswell. I mean, Drayvon Gibbs Longhorn looks totally different. He is huge. And which, I mean, I don't forget which player it was a couple of years ago. One of the players admitted to me that they committed to Illinois because they knew a lot of NBA teams were knocking down the door to get him on their, sites because he's that good. I mean, you cannot underestimate that. I mean, even in the women's program, his wife, the same thing. People want player development. I mean, Brett Bielema, same thing. These recruits will tell me the training facilities and the food. If you guys have a chance to look at the facilities and what they eat, the diet, look at how well of a job he did with Dane Danger. I mean, they monitor everything. So it's just not a program where you come in and you just do whatever. I'll tell you this, I'm not going to say the player's name because I'll be respectful. But one of the players that was on the team last year, I still talk to because I have a relationship with them. And the one thing he said to me, I cannot believe the difference in the fitness program here versus what we saw in Illinois. This is like eating donuts, is what he said to me. That tells you how good Fletcher is.
Yeah, and of course we know that Brad and I are the only two that really scare Fletch because he looks at us and goes, "There's no way even I could make a difference with these two."
It's almost impossible.
So the recruiting wheel never stops rolling. Any thoughts on what the Illini are doing in the recruiting on the men's side, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were out and about over the last few weeks. They really have done a great job of, following guys. Whether it's they're really involved with some 5-star kids. I think Caden Boozer is an interesting one. He's his twin brother. His twin brother is like one of maybe the top player in the country. Does he want to follow? People say, well, he's going to follow him. I'm not sure about that. I think there may be a time for them to maybe break apart, and then he gets to be more of a focal point. And I think he's really good, though. I mean, he's still a 5-star kid. I mean, just maybe not the top one player in the country. They've done a great. Jasper Johnson's another kid that they are. Although people are saying Illinois is not, nobody lists Illinois as a favorite. Remember Will Riley, by the way. Anyway, Illinois has done a really good job with Jasper Johnson, and then the other kid, Nicholas, what's his name? Kamania, the kid from West Coast, the shooter, right?
Yep.
He's been fantastic, and Illinois is really in deep with him early. And I think there's another kid that probably we're gonna talk more about. Actually, I'm sure Ked's probably working on a story on him right now, for all I know, because Ked's always up on these guys early. But there's a dude who is from what is it, Finland? That is a really I guess, just has really 6'10" kid who's really kind of Illinois was in on him early, one of the early offers, and he's had just a fantastic July, and now he's got all kinds of people. And so that is and I'm not going to be able to pronounce names, you know what I mean? Because
I know
it's weird. It's hard to say this kid's name, and I know it's different. It's like Mika Marine,
Mikanen or Mikanen
or
whatever. Yeah. So yeah.
So just think of like an episode of the series Dark with all those names at the start of it when we're like, exactly. I don't know who's who, but the good actors. So this was the player who got injured one day and then literally at Peach Jam and then came back
Micah Murinen.
Yeah, and then he came back the next day and just destroyed people after getting creamed.
And now he's got Duke and Kentucky offered this week. So obviously that's another one that they are very, have done they're a kid they got in early on. And they've also got some other kids. Mari Evans is another top 100 wing, the 6'5" kid that they have. Orlando. And here's the thing. There's a lot of kids that are like different because, you got Kamania, the kid, Jeff Alexander's been all over him, right? So we still have him. Tim Anderson's still got his guys. But we went from, there are some guys, like I notice a lot of like national guys will still list Illinois with some of these kids that Chester Frazier offered back in the day. Well, Chester's not recruiting in Illinois. So Illinois is not going to have that same relationship with those kids that they have. So now we're getting all these other kids that are Orlando Antigua guys. So it's just a different type of kid. It doesn't, not better or worse, but I'm just saying it's just different. You're going to have different names that pop up because Orlando is following them. And so that's where the Boozer, that's where this, these other guys have come from. And, of course, I told you about, I think I posted that about a week ago on the IlliniGuys message boards, for those guys. So I think that's a fun, it's fun to watch this stuff unfold and see where they're at. Now, the next key will be getting these guys on campus again. Some of who, some have already visited. Jasper Johnson already visited, but as they get on campus and they visit, you'll see more kids. If they get official visits in September and October, that really shows that they're in the mix and have a great shot.
Well, not to recite all the names again, but I'll tell you, let's look at the names that Brad just mentioned. 4 years ago, this wouldn't be possible. 5 years ago, he's mentioned 4 or 5 kids that are 5-star kids, legitimately 5-star kids that Illinois has a chance to get. They are able to sell their success, the facilities, the fan base. Can't say he didn't advance from the tournament. He's putting players in the NBA. They are getting 5-star kids, and it's nice to see Illinois' name mentioned with a bunch of blue bloods because they're going toe to toe. Will Riley, they went toe to toe with great teams to land a kid like this. So the way I look at it, you got a guy like Boozer. A lot of people think, oh, there's not a chance. There's a good chance. I am never, ever going to count this coaching staff out with who they can't get. My thing with Tim Anderson, a lot of people think I'm lying. Telling Tim no is hard. And I know Orlando is just at a different level. And the most underrated guy on the staff, to my personal opinion, is Jeff Alexander. He is striking gold. He's done really, really well of late. And they're going all over. They don't care where you're from. If you can play basketball and help them win games, you're an everyday guy, that's important. But it's nice to see at the top 15, top 20 players in the country that list Illinois. It's been a long time since we've seen that. And it's more than 1 or 2 guys.
I think I've got a theory on that because for years, Illinois has had to worry about getting in with a player and then having a Duke or a Kentucky or a Kansas parachute in at the last minute. And all of a sudden, Illinois isn't quite such a shiny new toy. Under Brad Underwood, now Illinois' got a Elite Eight trip. They've got 2 players in the NBA. And possibly after this year, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but possibly you could go from 0 one and dones to 2 one and dones at Illinois. When you have that, and then you add Orlando Antigua with the kids and the level of kid that he was recruiting at Kentucky, coupled with Tim Anderson, who's kind of like the determinator, he just keeps recruiting. You can't negotiate with him. He just keeps recruiting. And you got Jeff as well. But I just think Illinois, for the first time, they can actually afford to take a risk and parachute in on a few guys. And my proof of that is Jakucionis, Will Riley, and Ivasic. They came in and got guys against the best competition in the country. And I wonder if it's going to be harder. You can't follow them around anymore as they're going after guys, because Illinois can pivot and go after some big game with very little lead time. Brad, am I making up something, or is this something you think is actually reality?
No, I think you're reality. Here's the great part of Illinois is because they're so good in the portal, they don't, and I said this a couple of years ago, actually, because and they didn't totally go through it because they took a kid like Jason Jackson, who's more of a development on guys, maybe Jake Davis, because they wanted to make sure they had roster spot. But Illinois is going to shoot for the moon in recruiting because you can always pick up a guy in the portal. I mean, so if you miss on 5 stars, why not wait and see what you can get in the portal? You can always get a quality player in the portal who's probably going to be as good as an incoming freshman. You can get a mid-major kid or even a low-major kid who might be better than an incoming freshman if the incoming freshman's ranked in the 100 to 200 range, right? Now, those 5 stars, they're different. So go after the highly ranked kids and go after those. You take 1 or 2 a class. I mean, I've been talking to coaches all over, and this is kind of a wild – it's just a different era, and you're learning how to navigate this time period. And it's a detriment for high school kids who are not elite kids. It really hurts them. But sort of, because they're not going to get those high major, but in 2 years they go to a mid major and excel, then they're going to end up at a high major because they have that option, because you can move. So yeah, it's just a different world we're navigating. By the way, think about this in the softball world. We talk about, how about Najari Canaday? I know we're talking about Illinois. I have to bring this up. She got $1 million NIL because she's the best softball pitcher in the country to go to Texas Tech. So this is the National Player of the Year from Stanford. Everybody thought she was going to Oklahoma and Texas, whatever. Oklahoma and Texas both balked at $1 million a year. Of course, they're probably filling out rosters with all kinds of money. They've already got all these dudes, girls. So she ends up going to Texas Tech. So she's going to be now Oklahoma and Texas are going to be SEC, so it'll be a different conference. But Texas Tech is going to rule that Big 12 with her pitching now, especially this kind of somewhat depleted Big 12. And she is, I mean, it's a game changer. $1 million for softball. That's where we're at with NIL. It's kind of crazy. By the way, the other thing is, on another note, because I'm just going on tangents here, all the scholarship limits are increasing. Have you noticed the NCAA is moving? Men's basketball goes from 13 to 15. Baseball's going up from 11.7 to 34, I believe. Softball's going from 11.7 to 25. Just totally changing the landscape of college basketball or college sports. The weird part about it is they're not going to be able to, the small schools aren't going to be able to fund that many. They just won't be able to do it. But your Big Ten, your SEC, they got all the money. They're going to fund the scholarships.
But
so
Brad, hold on.
It's a different world.
Hold on, though. If you're a player, okay, you're Brad Sturdy and you're high school All-American right fielder, are you going to want to go to LSU and be the 22nd guy on the roster, or would you want to go somewhere where you might get more PT? That's my first question.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's a decision you have to make. You have to remember, if you're an All-American right fielder, an All-Star right fielder, you think you're going to play, though, too.
Right.
I mean, you don't go in there. I mean, if you're Paul Skeens as a pitcher coming in, you don't think, yeah, I probably can't pitch there. No, you're thinking, dude, I throw 100. I can pitch anywhere, right? So that's just what I think it's all mindset. But you make a great point because you can go there for 2 years and play. Are you going to get more development by playing and getting notoriety? And then you can transfer after your freshman or sophomore year after playing. It's almost like this in the olden days, people would go to JUCO to do that. Now, basically what they can do is they go to mid-major. It's like a junior college, for a lot of these kids. It's just a chance for them to show what they can do.
And then one final question, because this is what I think is the unspoken part of this, is if you've got 22 million approximately that it seems like the Big Ten and the SEC got in that neighborhood for what they're going to pay athletes. If you add a bunch of scholarships, that means of that 22 million, not going to be as much for each person, which means your ability to generate NIL to get those people to play for you is going to be bigger than ever. I don't know how this sustains, Brad, because at some point, no matter how much a guy or a gal wants their alma mater to win a title, at some point you can't keep throwing money that doesn't make you money. Or do you think vanity is going to empty bank accounts for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think vanity is going to eventually there has to be a limit on money, right? I mean, there's only so much money. But I think we're spending it certainly frivolously. I don't think there's a lot of benefit, like from a standpoint, at least when you get your name on a building, it means something. But the problem is that donors are going to eventually, it's exciting. Texas Tech just hired the coach from Louisiana Lafayette, right? And so that's why they have all this influx of the oil money and people throwing NIL. But if you don't win, then the NIL money is going to dry up. It goes away. You win, the more you win, more NIL money comes in, especially these programs. Now, if you're in Ohio State, if you're Georgia, you're Alabama, LSU, the NIL money keeps coming, right? Michigan, whatever. They've got it. People, because the donors, that's part of their life. These other schools, you got to win to bolster up, or you got to get a new coach because they don't believe in the old coach. They're not going to donate.
Yeah. Ked?
I think you do. You have to win. And I look at NIL a little differently. I look at NIL being a game changer, and it helps programs like Illinois to compete with some of the bigger teams, the LSU's in Tennessee, because you can go out. And every situation is different. Number one, you asked the question about would you rather go play and would you take the money? Every single kid and every family is different, So I think that's a part of it. But the way this NIL is done, and some schools, like I'll use Iowa. I'll use Iowa basketball. They don't. I don't want to say they don't care, but Iowa basketball is not just going to throw money on. I don't. That's just not who they are. Illinois is totally different. Indiana's different. And, Ohio State is starting, to pick it up a little bit. But I think at a school like Illinois specifically, if you win the basketball program right now, because they've done it for the second or third year in a row, I don't want to say the world's not going to dry up because I don't know that. But if you, as a rich, wealthy person, continues to make money and your team is continuing to win, why would you not throw the money in there? Because if you don't do it, the kids go somewhere else, and the program that you love, or if you're an alma mater, they're going to struggle again. So I do think at some point, though, they are going to cap this off at some point because you paying kids in college that much money. I think I'm all for them making money, but some of the other schools that can't afford it, they're not going to have a chance. And then you're going to go back to the same thing you had before. I like it the way it is right now because, again, it gives all the teams a fair chance. But the ones with the bigger budgets, like LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, and Tennessee, they're basically going to flex their muscles in Alabama. Then the other schools are going to start to trail again. Or I'll use football. Brett Bielema has done a good job of putting guys in the NFL. And so you could give them money, but then on the back end of it, you're going to have a shot at playing at the next level. So that's why I said every kid is different.
One final thought before we wrap up, because we want to give Shauna Green and the women's basketball team, they're having a heck of an off season as well. And we know that they are in the chase for Divine and Destiny. What are you guys hearing about the women's team on the trail? Because I know Shauna and her staff are just laser focused as well, and they don't get quite as much press as the men's team, but it seems like they've built one heck of a roster on the women's side to boot.
Oh, there's no
Well,
question. I mean, I think they've done a great job. Ked, you've got more insight than anybody on the women's program.
here's the deal. Charlotte Green said it. They have to win. They won the first year there, struggled a little bit with injuries, then they bounced back. They have done a tremendous job of recruiting. They have a legitimate shot at having a top 3 or 4 class in the country. You know, Destiny Jackson's a girl out of Whitney Young. It's been a long time since they got a player out of Whitney Young. I mean, yes, she listed her top 5 schools. Illinois was in the top 5. Like, you look at Divine Burge, who's one of the most decorated players in all of high school basketball. She listed her top 6. Put Illinois in it. I'm going to tell you, I did something. I wrote a column for another company that I worked with, and I did it because I was really upset. So there was a couple of radio guys that talked about Divine Burge, and they talked about her top 6, but Illinois to them was an afterthought. They were an afterthought because she's got South Carolina, she's got Baylor and Virginia Tech and Arizona. But I'm going to tell you right now, Illinois is in unbelievable shape to land this girl. I'm not thinking, okay, yeah, flip a coin. They'd have to really, really mess things up for her not to even be considered. I think at some point in time, if she narrowed her top 2 or top 3, I bet my house Illinois is going to make that list. And the same thing with Destiny Jackson. They're going after other girls that are in the top 25 as well. I mean, they want put together a good class because they're losing everybody. You know, the one girl that I'm just sad to see lose is Lana Galdelia. I was hoping she had a COVID year, so I'm calling the SID. Hey, is Adelia done? Because of COVID, but she's done. So they're going to put together a roster with a bunch of new players that are outstanding. And then you got to look at Gretchen Dolan, who was a high scorer. She's back, and then you got Barry Wallace, who was a McDonald's All-American. The key to all this, Mike, and to not ramble, Shauna has to win, and she realized that. But like right now, when you look at some of the preseason polls, and they don't mean anything, but they do matter because it's nice to see your name there. Illinois is listed in some of these top 25, preseason polls because of who they return back. So Shauna is good. Every coach down there, all the major coaches, they all have their own style and how they go about doing it. But you mentioned Divine. Shauna last week was in Ohio. Every one of her staff members followed Destiny and Divine because they both play on the same AAU team. They were front and center at every single game. And all those other schools that were involved, they weren't there. And I can tell you, I did talk to both families. They both noticed that Illinois was there. Even when they were in the losers bracket, Shauna Green was there Sunday when they had one game at 9:30 in the morning when nobody was there except for the players. She was sitting there with her son and her other assistant coaches.
Wow, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. So, folks, if you are ever on the fence about deciding if you want to join IlliniGuys.com, this is the type of stuff that you get when you're a member. We will do the occasional Zoom call for subscribers only. It's only $99 a year. You can get all of our stories. You don't have to worry about hey, I didn't subscribe when you click on a link on the internet. And you get the message boards. That's where not only do you read some of the stuff that Ked and Brad, they just can't do a story on it because nobody will go on the record. But that doesn't mean that these things aren't going to happen or they aren't indicative of something that might happen in the near future. So you can go onto the message boards and get things ahead of time. That way you're not surprised. And additionally, you can also on the message boards converse, build relationships, or start battles with other Illini fans. And of course, you can message Ked and Brad and say, hey, what did you mean by this? Or what about that? Or what are your opinions on something? That is why IlliniGuys.com is a place to be. It's a lot of fun. We're trying to create a great environment there. Please come and join our community. We've also got our IlliniGuys.com page or a channel, on YouTube. You can go there and then you get our videos I'm not certain why anybody wants to see the three of our faces, but if you're a glutton for punishment, we've got plenty of videos out there for you. We're trying to do more and more this way. So we'd love to have you go and subscribe there. That way you don't miss any. All of our podcasts, you can go to all the major podcast suppliers and you can get them there. So make sure you do that. That is also an easy way to keep up with what's going on in the world of Illini sports. And finally, you can go to the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. That's our weekly 2-hour show on the radio. Go to IlliniGuys.com, hit the radio button. You can find the city closest to you that broadcasts us, what day, Friday or Saturday, and what 2-hour time period that you need to glue yourself right in front of a radio so you can hear it. Or you can check that out on podcast as well. Until next time, folks, go Illini.